Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today is a solo video after some time, and today I would like to talk about Germany, the three wars: Franco-Prussian War, First World War, as well as the Second World War, and how these wars shaped the destiny of Germany and its people, and still continue to do so today. I believe in modern geopolitics, Germany is one of the most important players. It is one of the richest countries in the world, and it is one of the leaders in science and technology. Alternatively, it has had a long, complicated, and admittedly bloody history. So, it is very important to know and understand these wars in order to understand the German psyche today, and it goes a long way in understanding some of the decisions made by the German state even today. Our story begins when after immediately after the fall of the Holy Roman Empire. Germany as a nation state did not exist. It was rather a bunch of German speaking principalities which were united by language and custom and tradition, but they did not form or had not formed a political union as such. Um, Now, then came along a man by the name of Otto von Bismarck, and he said, Ich werde deutsche Einheit durch Eisen und Blut gründen, which meant that I will forge German unity through steel and blood. And this encapsulates the man because he was not a warmonger. He was a very prudent strategist. But he was also someone who had a vision, and that vision was to unite all these small German states into one cohesive unit. And that thing did come to place. This event is known as Deutsche Einigung, wherein all the small German states united to form one cohesive unit named Germany or Deutschland. And this, when it formed in the heart of Europe, and on the day of its formation, it became the largest country in Europe automatically. So even today, the largest country in Europe happens to be Germany. If you want to count Russia as part of Europe or not is a different discussion. In any case, uh, the moment it formed, it posed a threat to the hegemony of UK and France because those were the leaders of Europe until that time, or these were the two most players who had dominated Europe until that point. So all of a sudden, their hegemony was being challenged by this giant landmass, and of course, people were threatened. Um, all of these tensions culminated in the Franco-Prussian War, where France declared war on Germany and attacked. Now, there are some theories which say that Otto von Bismarck goaded the French people into attacking Germany. These remain open to speculations. In any case, there was a Franco-Prussian War, and in this, Germans fought well, they fought cohesively, and they won. So, in Germany's history thus far, this is the last war that was won by Germany. This war started in 1970 and ended in 1971, so it just lasted 1 year, but the Germans won decisively. And in glory of this war, they constructed a memorial known as Brandenburger Tor, which is there in Germany today, the Brandenburg Gate. And this is a monument to the last German victory. This, uh, with this, right, because Otto von Bismarck was a chancellor of Germany, and he was the king was Prince Wilhelm or William, right? This While the German states all united, they united under the Prussian domination. So Prussia is actually a nation state of Germany, and it is not a part of modern Germany, funnily enough. But it was one of the states that played a role in Germany's formation because it was one of their leaders, so to speak. So it was the first amongst equals, is a better way to put the role of the Prussian principality when it comes to the other principalities. And the German stereotype: the Germans are hard, disciplined, but they are also cold, and kind of all of that. So all the stereotypes that you think about the way Germans are, as in terms of their mentality, those are actually Prussian stereotypes. Whereas people from Bavaria or Bayer are relatively more chilled out, but they do wear lederhosen and they do have Oktoberfest. So the modern fun German stereotypes come from Bavaria, and the stereotype that Germans are cold, etc., actually come from Prussia. And because the German states had united mostly under Prussia's leadership, Prussia did continue to play a role in dictating German policy, and Prussian dominance is pretty apparent in the German strategic decisions that they took in the later years. Now, so France was conclusively defeated, and France remained seething from its defeat. Right, and the moment Germany formed, it actually began to dominate the rest of Europe because the Germans were hardworking. They did make massive contributions to science, philosophy, etc., etc. Now, so there was always some kind of push and pull, and of course there was always the continuous squabbling that keeps happening between any states when they are neighbors, right? Wars and some border skirmishes often remain seem inevitable. Additionally, there was also Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was on the eastern side of Germany, along with Switzerland, which always had mostly a neutral position. So there was an Archduke of Ferdinand, who was an Austrian guy, and he was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. Long story short, Serbia and Austria went to war, and for no reason, right, or for reasons which today seem ludicrous, all the other nation states got pulled into this conflict, which was admittedly at the beginning of very localized conflict. And these events spiraled into the First World War, where European powers got pitted against each other. Now, in the days of the past, Europeans would often engage in some battles with each other. But these battles were conducted under rules of chivalry, like two armies fight. Whenever it is apparent that one army cannot win, the general of the opposing defeated forces presents his sword as a gesture of defeat to the opposing forces, and everyone goes home, and human rights of most people are mostly respected. These were wars that were of genteel sensibilities. The problem was now that modern technology was being involved, and modern technology included better firepower and bombs and artillery shells, and this war truly unleashed a horror upon the Europeans, right? So the First World War, which was fought between 1914 and 1918, this one was started by Germany, right? And they did attack France. Now, I'm not saying it was started by Germany in terms of like they were the first participants. As I mentioned, this was brought about by the events that were happening between the Austrians and the Serbs. But the attack on France and etc. on the rest of Europe was initiated by Germany, right? That is why the Germans say that they initiated both World War One and World War Two. So in this war, it's because of artillery firepower meant that charging an enemy position was an exercise in futility. So what would happen is that people would dig in defenses, and young men would be forced to charge into machine gun fire, and they would be obliterated and they would be butchered en masse. And it was a horrifying thing that included horrors like, so people would dig trenches, right? Trenches are basically giant like pits in the ground that go on for miles and miles. So imagine a border between France and Germany where people are clashing, and both of those military forces dig these giant holes in which they have to stay for months. And the whole time they're lobbing artillery shells at each other. There's machine gun fires, and the most horrifying and brutal part of it, young men are charging across an open field into machine gun fire. This traumatized Germans in a way that is difficult for us modern people to even imagine. Adolf Hitler, right? He was one of those people who was involved in trench warfare, and it changed him, and it changed every person who was there. One more person who was there was the man who wrote Lord of the Rings. Funnily enough, so this is World War One, and its trauma shaped the European generations which lived through those times. Now, most Europeans walked away from it saying, "Oh my God, though that was horrific. We should never do this again. We should not do war again." However, it is important to know under what conditions Germany was forced to surrender. Now, in this time, Otto von Bismarck was still alive. So when it became apparent that in this warfare, Germany was not going to win, and the simple reason was Germany was not going to win is because it is land. It is, I mean, it has some access to the sea in terms of Nordsee, but it does not have that much of an access to the open oceans, the same way, for example, Great Britain has. So Germany could be blockaded and Germany could be sort of stopped. And so in trench warfare, it was a war of attrition, and the troops which were better supplied happened to be the French ones. And slowly but steadily, Germany was losing ground, and their defeat was imminent because they did not have the resources to sustain themselves. Otto von Bismarck saw the writing on the on the wall, and Germany did capitulate. However, if you were a soldier in the German trenches, you would think, "Hey, we're winning," right? Because it was not obvious that your situation was lost. So there might even be some tactical victories in the short term, but the strategic view of the whole situation was that it was that the defeat, a German defeat, was a foregone conclusion, and dragging it out would have only resulted in more casualties. So Germany, or Otto von Bismarck and Germany at that time, took the prudent decision, and they decided to surrender to France. Now France was seething from its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, right, which led to the creation of the Brandenburger Tor. So it forced a bunch of humiliating treaties on Germany, and the reason for that was the unimaginable destruction that Germany caused in France. So do you know that even today, even after more than 100 years, there are parts of the French countryside that one cannot go to for the simple reason that you might never know when you step on an old German artillery shell and are blown all the way to hell. So can you imagine the level of destruction that Germany caused in France, the level of casualties, etc., etc.? Because of this, when France finally was able to defeat the Germans, it forced a bunch of humiliating treaties. Their goal was, one, to break the back of the German military to make sure that they never dared such a foolish endeavor again, and second thing, to break the industrial base of Germany. So I lived in this area called Nordrhein-Westfalen, or the area of the Rhine on the western part of Germany, and this area is even today an industrial powerhouse. And in those days, this this being an industrial powerhouse, was even more relevant to the situation. Because of this, France wanted French troops occupied those areas of Germany. They forced a bunch of humiliating conditions on Germany called the Treaty of Versailles, where Germany would have to pay a lot of reparations to France and all the countries that they had played a role in damaging, so on and so forth. And because of this, Germany was forced into hyperinflation. So their economy went to bust. It went to hell. It hit their currency went into hyperinflation simply because the German government had to print more money because they were getting poor. So you had visuals in Germany like people, loading up money into wagons and carts just to buy a loaf of bread. These horrifying conditions come from those times where German currency became worthless. Um, Now imagine a young Adolf Hitler, right? He was a soldier in the trenches of World War One. He got injured there, and one of the most horrific things about those times was the use of mustard gas, poison gas. So there was a chemist by the name of Fritz Haber who who played a role in inventing poison gas, mustard gas, and he was a Jewish person. So he actually found a way to convert nitrogen in the air into urea, which can then be used for fertilizers. This is one of the reasons why this world can support 8 billion people today. It revolutionized farming, it saved a bunch of lives. Ironically, he used that same process to create poison gas, which was then used on the soldiers who were desperate young men in the trenches of World War One. So imagine you're a soldier in a trench in World War One. You're a young man of 17, 18 years old. You watch your friends get blown to bits. Every day you live in fear of being shot or blown to bits by an artillery shell, and suddenly you see this gas seeping in. It seeps into your mouth, your lungs, and your ears and eyes, and begins to burn from the inside out. So the way people would die from mustard gas is that this gas would trigger like a reaction, and people would start choke and cough, and there would be phlegm and blood and mucus, and people would essentially drown on dry land because of this mustard gas. So the death by that felt like being drowned slowly. So this is one of the horrors of World War One. So Hitler had come out from it extremely traumatized, and as had a generation of young men. They were desperate, they were poor, they were angry, and they were humiliated, and they had no options left. And this it is in this Germany that Adolf Hitler decided to take his resentment and take his anger and frustrations and put them on an innocent, helpless minority, the Jews, who had done nothing to anyone. So they had no role. So I'm not saying so Jews were a successful minority simply because they had prioritized education, but they were patriotic Germans just like the rest. In fact, Fritz Haber, who had played a role in trying to help Germany win, was himself a Jew. Albert Einstein was a Jew. Robert Oppenheimer was a Hungarian Jew. So they had enormous contributions to science, mathematics, every field you can imagine. Sigmund Freud was a Jew, Karl Marx was a Jew. So Jews are and were like everyone else, good and bad, just like the rest of us. But Hitler decided to target them specifically, and those young men, they were looking for someone to blame, and they found a Jewish minority. Hitler reinvigorated the German spirit. It is important to know why the Germans decided to back him in the first place. And one of the reasons why is because they were desperate, they were hungry, and they did not feel like they had good options left. And in their midst comes an orator. Now Hitler's oratory in German was terrifying, but it was good. He was a good orator. He would give these speeches to Germany where he would remind them of the glory of their fatherland. And he would make promises to restore them to their glory. He made promises to restore German pride. He brought back images of Wilde Germania. So he said, yes, so there's this concept of Wilde Germania, that the Germans were barbarians, that the Romans never managed to quell or pacify. And many thinkers, including Nietzsche, thought that Christianity had played a civilizing role on the German people, because Germans are Celts, so they had this warrior mentality, and that was somewhat pacified by Christianity's influence, because it spoke about peace and love and turning the other cheek and forgiveness, so on and so forth. So this is what was propounded in those times. And Hitler spoke of the Tausendjährigen Reich, which is the thousand year kingdom, the Holy German Kingdom, so on. And he spoke of restoring that. So just one of his lines is, ich werde Tag und Nacht streben für die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes und für den tausendjährigen Reich, which is, I will work day and night for the future of the German people and for the thousand-year kingdom. And in an era where politicians were bland, this message got on like wildfire, and it reinvigorated an entire nation. The Germans began to mobilize, they began to industrialize, and then there was no stopping them. One of the strategies developed was that of blitzkrieg, which was about attacking enemy positions in a lightning warfare and just overtaking them by using overwhelming force in a very, very short amount of time. So after the First World War, France had constructed a defense known as the Maginot Line. It was thought that these fortified positions could not be overrun. Now, what the Germans did was that they invented methamphetamine, which is a drug, meth, and they gave their soldiers, especially their German soldiers sitting in tanks, ate Panzer Schokolade or tank candy, which was chocolate mixed with methamphetamine. So they did not sleep for 2 or 3 days. So imagine soldiers from a very industrialized, developed military who are high on meth, and they will not sleep for 3 days, and they will just charge enemy positions in a horrifying yet effective invasion. And this is what Germany did. And they were able to take no, take France like this because they were able to cross the Maginot Line with their tanks. And after that, the will essentially of the French military broke, and they were just not able to handle it. And people often criticize France for, oh, you guys were not able to, oh, you guys lost, etc., and you guys surrendered too quickly. But what could you do? These were not tactics which had ever been seen ever before. And no country except Russia, which had a border with Germany, was really able to stop them. And England was able to stop them, but it had the backing of United States of America, the biggest, most powerful country in the world, and it did not share a contiguous land border with Germany, which made attacking them a bit difficult. So the German Wehrmacht was an incredible fighting force. They were disciplined, organized, and this brings us to the Second World War, right? Because Germany tried to take Poland, and they did take half of Poland. Russia took half of Poland, so everything seemed fine. But then Germany did not stop there because those people had been indoctrinated into the propaganda. Now Hitler made these people believe that they were superior, that they were superior race, that everyone else was inferior, blah blah blah. He had a propaganda minister named Joseph Goebbels, who poisoned the minds of the German people with his radio addresses, and because of this, they became fanatic. Their history books of little kids were changed to include ideas of Jews being evil and them being superior, and the whole nation became a toxic cesspool. And those young men were once again pitched into a stupid, relentless war, which led to the deaths of an ungodly number of people. Now, Germany was successful on its western frontier. It is on the eastern frontier that Germany truly lost, because people often say, yeah, America defeated Germany, England defeated Germany, and those things are not true. If you just look at the casualty numbers, I'm sure America and the United States and all the UK and all other countries played their role, but the most of the work which was done in defeating the Germans was actually done by the Russians and the people of the Soviet Union. The casualties they took are absolutely horrifying. Around 20 million people in the Soviet Union died in the Second World War, and around 5 million people in Germany. So all in all, it led to the deaths of 25 to 30 million people just in Germany and the Soviet Union. The Germans had a strategy because if you remember from the part of the First and Second World War, one of the reasons that the Germany lost the First World War because they were starved of resources, and they were somewhat of a landlocked country, and they were small, relatively small in terms of the geographic area, because at that time France and UK had empires. Because of this, Hitler wanted to expand, and he decided to expand into the eastern part of Europe, and he considered Slavs to be an inferior race. So the strategy was just to kill the Slavs and to do a genocide of Eastern Europeans and to free up that space, because he said that Deutschland braucht Lebensraum. Germany needs living space. And he would, the Aryans, as he called themselves, or as Hitler called them, Aryans, would be able to live in those places, and etc. etc. So initially it was just a standard war, but Hitler told his generals to ignore the standard rules of warfare and honorable surrender. So Slavs and the Russians and Soviet soldiers would give up, and they would essentially be subjected to horrifying conditions in POW camps where there would be starvation. A lot of people died there, so on and so forth. So since the strategy was so initially people of Eastern Europe were happy to be freed from the yoke of Russian oppression, right? Because they didn't want to live under a communist regime. So in an alternate universe, Germans could have offered the Slavs the same industrial benefits, and it could have been a better world for everyone. Where communists would have been pushed back, but no, they did not. Because of their stupid ideas of racial supremacy, they began to target and do a genocide on everyone, right? Slavs, people who were formerly known as Gypsy, now known as wanderers, the Jews. And in this death machine, no one wanted to be a part of it. No one could be a part of it. So Russia and Germany, these two behemoths clashed. Russians and Stalins had a good idea of just retreating and letting the Germans go on into their territory. And Russia is a massive, it's like a continent. You can't, by the time Germans marched, they just could not capture Moscow and the key cities on time. The Russian winter set in, and then began a horrifying slog where the Russians began to push Germany into. And this war, right? In this war, it is important to know that the people of the Soviet Union had taken 20 million casualties. So they were paying for blood, and they wanted to take revenge on the Germans. So when the Soviets pushed back and back and back, they pushed back all the way into Germany. And when they entered Prussia, what happened was one of the most horrific things in human history, where essentially every man was killed and every woman was raped. And they entered Berlin, and the same thing began to happen. So in that time, the German women had a saying that, oh, it's better to have a Russian man on your belly than to have an American bomb on falling on your house. And this is the level of horrific cruelty that the German civilians were then subjected to, because the Russians took their revenge, and they extracted their pound of flesh, so to speak. They extracted their prize in blood from the Germans, and they made innocent civilians pay. And this is when Russians committed horrific war crimes on Germans. And I'm not excusing any side. It was wrong of the Germans to do those war crimes on the innocent people of Russia and the Soviet Union, but it was equally wrong of the Soviet Union and the Russians to commit horrifying atrocities on some innocent German civilians. Like, what is a 16-year-old girl have to do anything with giant geopolitical situations? So Hitler, like the coward he was, just killed himself in his bunker. He could have surrendered and saved the lives of innocent people, but he didn't care. He was an evil coward to the very end. And at the end, he asked little boys as young as 14 to defend Berlin. And this is how the great Vaterland fell. This is how notions of Aryan and German supremacy fell, and everything went to hell. The Second World War traumatized Germany in a way that very few people can understand, because they lost, their horrifying atrocities were committed on them. And the whole point, the sentiment of the world was, you guys deserved it. You guys had it coming. And to this day, you often see jokes made by people about Germans being Nazis and blah blah blah. And this was 70 to 80 years back. And this war continues to haunt the German psyche today. And if you want to know how these wars have shaped Germany today, one of the reasons why uh, the Allies did not negotiate a surrender with Germany was because of the Franco-Prussian and First World War, because they said that Germany has to give us unconditional surrender, because these are words of Franklin D. Roosevelt, by the way, that we have to go into Germany, we have to go into Berlin, and we have to fundamentally reshape that nation into a peaceful country if we are to have peace in this continent. Because in a space of 100 years, from 1970 to 1945, less than 100 years, they launched like three wars, and in total some of the bloodiest conflicts in human history, right? So because of this, it was important for the Allies to force Germany into an unconditional surrender, because they did not trust, they thought Germans were just crazy warlike beings who would unleash hell periodically. Uh, so because of this, no ally accepted Germany's partial terms of surrender. It was broken, and to understand how much the Allies reshaped Germany, one needs to just look at the German Constitution. So the first word of the first sentence of the German Constitution happens to be "Die Würde des Menschen ist unantastbar," which means the worth of a human being, or the human dignity, is inviolable. And this line is a testament to exactly what had happened in the last 100 years to make sure that Germany never embarked on the path of totalitarianism again. This war and the guilt caused by it haunts modern Germans. So I've spoken to Germans who are my age, who were born in the 90s, who have no reason to feel guilt about any of it, but they still feel a sense of collective responsibility for what their people did. and what happened. And because of this, Germany has been trying to change its image. And that is one of the reasons why they took in 1 million refugees at that time, to show the world just how far they had come, etc. And that led to a disaster of its own, as is apparent today. In conclusion, I think these wars have shaped human history, and these wars have shaped the German psyche in those terms. So, how exactly have they shaped? The first way is that modern Germans are really committed to anti-racism, and they are committed to showing people that they are the most welcoming, blah blah blah, because of the wars. Second, human dignity is inviolable. Third thing is that after the Second World War, USA really focused on rebuilding Germany into an economic powerhouse, because they did not want to repeat the conditions of the First World War, which precipitated the Second World War. So under the Marshall Plan, a lot of investments were made into Germany, and they were made into a rich, powerful, but weak from perspective of military nation. So the German military is, to be honest, not the best military in the world, especially if you look at compared to their eras past. Fourth is that there was a rise of Poland as a giant military power. So today Poland is so hostile to immigration and foreigners, it is because of its history. And the guilt faced by young people in Germany driving a lot of their socio-political and geopolitical decisions. And thank you. I think this is the end of this video. Let me know in the comments if I missed something or made some mistakes. And yeah, like, share, and subscribe.